Hey guys, it's Beardless Dave today coming to you with another video. Thanks for watching, as always, I really appreciate it. Before we dive into the video, just to let you know, we do have a link to our Discord server down in the description below if you feel like joining and talking about investing with us there. As well, I'd always appreciate it if you hit like and subscribe, really helps out with the videos and the channel. So with that out of the way, for today, we are discussing a topic that has been on my mind quite a bit over the past year or so, or really since I started investing in Rocket Lab. And this topic, of course, is whether there's a demand problem for Electron or not, and not really just Electron, but the entire small launch vehicle space, really anything, say 500 kilograms and below, or perhaps even a ton and below. Is there a demand problem for this space? And there's a lot of data to go over here. So I've done a lot of research. We've pulled up a bunch of industry reports to try and answer this question. And I've got a lot of interesting takeaways to share with you. But before we do get into that, I just want to say, I love Rocket Lab. It's one of my favorite companies, and I love space. I love rockets. But as an investor, you do need to identify your own biases and try to just be completely logical about it when it comes to your money, and don't let your emotions get in the way. So this is one of those videos where I'm really trying to be as unbiased as possible, try to take a even-handed look at it. So, even if I say something that may not be flattering to Rocket Lab, you should know I still love the company. I'm just trying to make sure the investing decision also makes sense, not just because, I think it's a cool company. Ultimately, it has to make us money. So with that out of the way, let's dive into some of the data. I've got a lot of stuff to show you. Okay, so first off, when I was researching this topic, I just want to pull up some data with you. And again, don't get mad at me. I'm not attacking Rocket Lab here. This is just facts. These are just numbers and quotes. So back in 2014, according to an official article by Caleb Henry, I've linked it down below here, Rocket Lab said they were planning weekly launches, but the authors have not come across that claim recently. So all the way back in 2014, Rocket Lab was planning weekly launches of their Electron. Clearly, that hasn't come about. We're now in 2022, and we're looking at a launch rate of about one per month. Now, back in March 2019, so 5 years later, Electron launches were planned to be every 2 weeks by the end of the year. So by the end of 2019, we're supposed to be launching every 2 weeks. And once again, that hasn't happened. We're launching every month currently. Now, this one, I am willing to give them a little bit of a pass on here because COVID really threw a wrench into the whole situation. But ultimately, in June 2021, monthly Electron launches were planned. So I guess they were walking back the every 2 weeks that they had said previously in 2019. In reality, Electron ended up launching 6 times in 2019, 7 times in 2020. This report was from 2021, where they had an estimated 9 launches there. And again, this one quoted straight from Rocket Lab's site, saying that they were planning monthly launches of the Electron at this point. So clearly something's happened, right? They never hit any of these targets for the Electron launch. And we're just trying to figure out what's going on and really dig into it here. So this is one thing Peter Beck says a lot in some of his earnings calls, investor day presentations, just interviews, stuff like that. There's never a payload waiting for a rocket. They always have the rockets ready for the payloads. So, the limiting factor here for the number of launches they're able to do is not because they can't build the Electrons fast enough, and it's not because the launch ranges are not available. The limiting factor here is actually customers being ready. So even if they have customers saying, they want to launch in the future, they just don't have enough customers ready now to launch in specific slots in order to get enough launches off the ground per year. Just another chart here, we have launch outcomes. So red would be failures, green successes, and this light gray, light blue would be planned because we're not done 2022 yet. This was also, I think, made a little bit previously, but we can see that while the trend is definitely going in the right direction here, and we've had a nice jump in 2022 compared to 2021, we still haven't hit that bi-weekly or monthly cadence. I mean, we're just hitting it now in 2022. We had a dip in 2021 again, and gave them a bit of a pass on that because of COVID, and it really messed up a lot of companies out there. But yeah, 2019, no failures. We have maybe 6 launches, maybe 7 here, and looks like 6. And we were talking all the way back in 2019 about 2 launches per week. So what's happened here, and why haven't the launches materialized? Why haven't the customers materialized? Keep in mind, I'm still holding Rocket Lab stock. I'm still an investor. Just some questions I am trying to investigate and do my due diligence on. Now, it's not just an Electron problem here, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm just attacking Rocket Lab in this video, because this really is about the entire small or nano lift vehicle market for these small satellites. So just talking about some other companies, we know Astra was aiming to perform 300 flights per year by 2025. This is as of a presentation they made in February 2021. Obviously, that hasn't happened. They've completely scrapped their Rocket 3.3 platform, given up on that. They're not even going to be launching anything until 2025. So big miss on this, although I can't blame everything on this one for demand, because they had so many technical problems with the rocket that this isn't all because of demand. So at least there's that for us. Now we have Firefly and Virgin Orbit aiming towards 2 launches per month. This was as of 2021. Again, some technical issues here. These guys are still really working on their setup and not fully ready to go. But it just gives you a sense of all the companies planning so many launches, and we have to ask ourselves, is there room for it in the industry? Are there the customers for all these companies to coexist? As well, there's another private company I wasn't as familiar with. It's called ABL. They're not traded on the public stock market, so you may not know them either. But they're projecting 8 launches in 2022. Again, this was as of some previous article, so I'm pretty sure that they have not had a successful launch as of yet, although I do need to look into that as well. And then 2023, they had projected 16 launches. So again, significant numbers here. That's over 1 a month already in just what would have been their second year of launching. A lot of new companies with a lot of plans for a ton of launch. This doesn't even get into Relativity, so many others that we haven't mentioned. There's a lot of companies on the horizon trying to launch in this category, and we haven't even hit our 2 launches per month yet for Rocket Lab. So it's the entire space, not just Electron, but it's something I do want to look into more closely, see if we can get some answers. So, I have done some research here and looked through a bunch of different industry reports that are available online. Some you have to pay for, so I've only gotten excerpts or clippings from them. Others are completely free, and that's really nice, and I can get all the data. This Euroconsult one, they do run a conference for satellite manufacturers and launchers every year. It's a lot of interesting stuff. So, one snipping from it, what we can see. So basically just a high-level overview here from them. We can see that from 2012 to 2021, we are looking at 446 average small sats launched per year, whereas from 2022 on to 2031, we're now looking at 1,846 small sats launched per year. So it's definitely a good sign that the industry is moving in the right direction. The market is growing. Maybe there is demand for more launch here, but let's keep diving into this further. We can also see that the vast majority of these missions are now planned to be constellation missions. 81% will be constellations as opposed to just one-off launches. So you really do want to go after these constellation network contracts, the big contracts. Continue on here for Euroconsult's report. We have just some more numbers. Small sats to be launched. Again, we're looking at a growth rate of 4x. Mass to be launched is 6x. And the industry value, again, 4x. We're looking at 258%. So that's all good stuff for Rocket Lab. We're looking at a manufacturing market value because, of course, Rocket Lab is not just a launcher. They also manufacture satellites of their own as well as components and provide software, full vertically integrated. So they could potentially get in on some of this $55 billion. Launch market is, again, smaller. We're looking at $7.6 billion at the end of 2021 and $28.4 billion by 2031. So still growing rapidly, and on a percentage basis, actually growing quicker. We've got 279%, but still smaller numbers than the satellite manufacturing. Nevertheless, seeing this growth is definitely good. But we want some more details on who these customers are, who they're going to be launching with, that sort of thing. So let's keep going here. Again, 2 decades in units and mass, average numbers launched per year going up, average mass per kilogram, we were at 141. Now in the future, we're looking at 198. This is actually fine for Electron because we have a capacity to launch about 300 kilograms per launch. So 198 on average is still well in their wheelhouse here of being able to launch that. And of course, the manufacturing is going up, and a lot of these are constellations though. So some of these constellations do find it more efficient to launch on large, heavier lift rockets where they can, launch 60 plus at a time, as opposed to a dedicated rocket getting a certain satellite into a certain orbit, which is really the goal for Electron. So not entirely clear from this. Definitely these single satellite missions are probably a better for Electron in that they would just be a single satellite, and there's a good chance it needs to get to a specific location in order to do its job properly. And if you just send it off with 100 other satellites and open the fairing and just send them off into orbit, it's probably not going to be where it needs to be. So this market here still growing significantly, but is smaller by far than the constellations, which is seeing massive growth. Another report here we just took some top line numbers from because unfortunately they do charge for it. We got a little sample, but again, the small sat market revenue totaled $3.5 billion in 2020 according to Future Market Insights, and is expected to reach almost $13 billion by 2031. So kind of similar numbers. We're seeing some large growth here. Compound annual growth rate of 18.5% is great for the industry. So the industry at least is still growing, as we saw. Again, just another provider here giving us similar numbers. They have $13.71 billion by 2030, so a little higher and 1 year earlier. Again, just projecting some pretty solid growth numbers for the industry. But let's keep going here because SpaceWorks has some interesting things to say. So the amount of payload per year sent to orbit is expected to greatly increase over the next decade, but there's a plethora of companies aiming to provide a ride for these payloads. Analysis conducted by their commercial and advisory team indicates that there is already an oversaturation of launch companies, especially in the small launch class vehicle. So that's a little concerning. There are 73 companies with vehicles in various phases of development or operation for small launch. That's a lot of companies planning to launch these small payloads that Rocket Lab has to compete with. I do have to say, though, I would really pit Rocket Lab up against pretty much anyone in this space right now. They have the flight heritage, they have the proven track record of success, and Electron is going reusable, but it's still a difficult industry to operate in, and the customers have not been where we wanted yet. Continuing on, this is an interesting chart and slightly disturbing, especially for some of these other players. I think, again, Rocket Lab is so well established, I don't see them being one of the ones that don't make it. But just look at this chart. So we have projected number of launch vehicles by year and maximum number of feasible vehicles for the small launch space. Of course, this is just one report written by one company. It's what they believe. This is not a fact for sure. But we're looking at, this has got to be at max 4, probably 3 feasible vehicles operating in the market at one time. Projected number, it's like we're looking at probably 73 here. So we've got room in this area for 3 vehicles and 73 projected. I mean, those are astounding numbers. It's a massive supply of launch vehicles for a market which, according to them, only holds 3 vehicles. So a lot of customers the customers are being fought over by a lot. Now, of course, a lot of these vehicles are not operating yet. They're unproven, so you may not want to worry too much about competing with a vehicle that is still a paper rocket at this point or still a work in progress. But something to keep in mind when you're thinking about the Electron small launch space. Now we get on to the Bryce Tech report, which is one I really like because they actually give out the entire report for free. This is Small Sats by the Numbers 2022. Thank you, Bryce Tech. Some interesting information in this one. So obviously we're seeing massive increases in the amount of small sats launched. This is under 600 kilograms, and again, Rocket Lab does 300 kilograms, maybe 320 max. So in terms of Electron anyway. Also, a lot of these charts can be good news for Neutron, by the way. So keep that in mind as well. But right now we're really looking at the Electron demand. So while this growth is extremely impressive, this entire chunk here is just Starlink and OneWeb. And that's a massive chunk. Now we know that Rocket Lab is never going to launch Starlink. It's just not going to happen. SpaceX always will launch their own satellites there, so that's all off the table. There's the potential one day to launch some OneWeb satellites perhaps, but there's no contracts between OneWeb and Rocket Lab, which I find kind of surprising, to be honest. They've basically signed contracts with almost everyone else at this point. They had launch contracts with the Russians, which they then had to cancel. They signed a contract with Virgin Orbit, I believe, and then that ended up getting canceled. They signed a contract with Relativity, but the launcher is still a few years out, I believe, and they're also launching on ISRO, I think it is, the India Space Agency, and they actually are getting a ride on a Falcon 9 as well. So potentially down the line, Rocket Lab could see some of that, but the vast bulk of this is Starlink, and we won't see it. So for Electron, we're only looking at this amount, which is still growing, but a lot smaller. And another startling factor, actually, if you look at 2020 to 2019, take out Starlink from both, and we're looking basically flat here on a number of spacecraft launched. So you like to see that growth. It didn't happen in 2020. Again, maybe the pandemic played a factor, but we're in 2020, the growth did continue. So once again, looking at the various missions we have, and we're seeing a big growth in commercial, which is great. You love to see it. Of course, I love it when Rocket Lab has contracts for governments because they always pay their bills. You can rely on them for that. But really, for the industry to take off, you want commercial customers. I don't think you want to run your business only working for the government. And we're seeing massive growth. Of course, once again, mostly OneWeb and Starlink. Other commercial satellites, while starting to rise here, not quite as quickly, but it is coming. Okay, next up here, number of operators deploying small sats, and this you do want to see go up, because if it's a massive industry of tons of small sats, but there's only 1 or 2 companies building and operating them, that's not really the market you want to operate in as Rocket Lab and Electron. You want to have lots of different potential customers. There's demand, they're competing against each other, and that's what a healthy market really comes to. So seeing that we have operators deploying their first small sats going up is, I think, a good trend for Electron as well. Once again, 86% of small sats launched between 2012 and 2021 were owned by only 5 operators, and this is what we want to get away from. We want to see this number rise, which it looks like it is, because we have a small contingent here of 163 other players. That's only 14% of the market, but we really want to see a lot more bigger players push in, and they are starting to. We've seen a lot of other companies, Planet Labs, I know Parth has talked about a lot on the Discord. We have, AST Space Mobile, Terran. There's a lot of new players coming online, so I think the industry is growing. We're going to have more competition, but we do want to keep an eye and just make sure that it's not all coming from Starlink, because those numbers can really deceive you for demand in the industry. Once again, so now we have share of total up mass for small sats, and this is so total mass launched in the entire industry and how much of it were small sats, things that the Electron could potentially be able to launch. Now, obviously, we're seeing massive growth once again because of Starlink and OneWeb, but if you take that out, it's pretty flat and even gone down a little bit. So we do want to see this continue to go up if we're going to have more and more operators come online, and we still need more customers to launch for Electron. We're not yet at the point where we want to be, which is 2 launches a month is when we get to be really profitable, and right now we're at 1 launch per month. So can Electron be profitable at less than 2 launches per month? I think they can. When I was doing my modeling, it looked like, especially with reusability, we can be profitable with less than 2 launches per month, but we definitely want more than 1 a month. And scale really plays a big factor in this. So really, the numbers change dramatically as you scale up. And that's what we need to see, and we need the customers to be there. So there's been a lot of data shown and shared here, but let's discuss our takeaways from all these graphs and charts and information. So just some thoughts here to wrap up. Nobody loves Rocket Lab more than me, except maybe Peter Beck and a few people out there. But, I'm a big fan of it, and ultimately, the launch has not grown as rapidly as they originally thought it would, and the reason behind that, outside the pandemic in 1 year really hurting things, seems to be customers not being ready. Now, we are seeing some good growth on that front this year. We're seeing them finally hitting that 1 per month sustained rate throughout the entire year. We really need that to continue. Ideally, 2 per month. I think we could probably make a profit if we're looking at averaging 1.5 per month, maybe 1.7 per month, that kind of thing. But we really want to start making the real money on this, and it hasn't been there yet. So do we think it's going to get there? I believe next year they've said they want to hit a run rate of 2 a month by the end of the year. So we won't have 24 launches next year, but by the end of the year, we should be getting to that run rate. So next year, we're probably looking at something more like 17, 18 launches perhaps, which is, I think, where you can start to look at turning a profit, especially as you add in reusability. But the overall market is a concern. Demand is one of the hardest things to predict. You can always see as the output of the factory scales up, it's a lot easier to predict how many vehicles they can make than how many customers will be ready to launch at a given time in a given year. Very difficult. That's why we look at a lot of these industry reports, and they do give us some insight, but it's extremely tough. There's no easy answers here. Looking at a lot of the charts, they're all going up and to the right, meaning there's more and more small sats going up. But we do have to keep in mind a lot of them are constellations, a lot of them are SpaceX and OneWeb, so discounting those, you've got to think about ones where they want a small sat to go to a specific orbit and a specific location, not just ones that they can basically distribute all over the place, like a Starlink, if you will. Those constellation launchers are probably better left for a Neutron type thing. If it's a small constellation, maybe 8 or 10 satellites, then Electron can probably come into play once again. So I'm not selling my Rocket Lab by any means. I will gladly take the Electron against any of these newcomers because I think they have the track record. I think they have a head start on reaching that scale. And of course, reusability, they're way further along on that than anyone else. So I'm happy with Electron's performance to this point. They've actually launched what they've said they're capable of launching. They've actually launched 320 kilograms for that capstone mission when they only, according to their manual, were supposed to be able to launch 300. So they've really been able to push it to the limit, whereas a lot of other vehicles have done small demonstrator missions, small amounts of kilograms, haven't really launched anywhere near as much as they say they can. Definitely demand is a concern, something we have to keep watching closely, and ultimately I think that will shape how well Electron does for Rocket Lab going forward. So looking at it, I do think we can hit that 2 per month mark. Maybe it takes a little bit longer than we'd hoped. The market is growing. Eventually we should get there. Whether some other competitors are able to take some of those missions and contracts from Rocket Lab is up in the air. We know Virgin Orbit is pushing hard. Obviously, Astra's out of the game when it comes to Rocket 3.3. We'll see when Rocket 4.0 launches, but it won't be that soon. Relativity is still working towards it. There's a lot of other small companies, private companies. We really have to see how that plays out. We all know space is extremely difficult. So right now, Electron is still the best game in town for small launch. Hope this has been interesting for you. If so, please consider hitting like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.